Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing well. So today I am back to do the self-aware reader tag. This tag was originally created by Coynie and I will link her original video down below. I'm not sure if I have actually been tagged to do this by anybody, but if I have, I will link their video down below as well. This particular tag is all about being very reflective and, as the title suggests, self-aware about your reading habits and the kind of things that you like to pick up. Are there any particular recurring themes when it comes to your favourite books or your least favourite books? Because being self-aware as a reader is definitely something that I have been working to be more. And even since beginning this channel 7 months ago, I feel like I've gotten a lot better at working out the kinds of things that I do and do not like in books. Question number 1 is, what most draws you into a novel or a story and makes you want to keep reading? Plot, characters, writing style, atmosphere, or something else? So for me, I have definitely said in the past before that when it comes to fiction, I am definitely most drawn in by characters and relationships. For me personally, it doesn't matter how great your writing style is, how great your world building is, if I cannot distinguish between your different characters, if I don't get a sense of their personalities and their relationships to each other, I'm probably not going to care too much. I'm particularly noticing that with my current read, which is the Betrayals by Bridget Collins. This is a book where the genre is kind of unclear. It's kind of a little bit magical realism, a little bit like alternative history. In many ways, if it was being handled by a different author, I probably wouldn't like this book, but because Bridget Collins is so very focused on character, I'm finding myself really liking it. Something that I've recently worked out, particularly in my tier ranking historical fiction novels video, is that when it comes to books, I'm also really drawn in by interesting concepts. I've been watching a lot of videos recently where people have been talking about like their favourite authors or authors that they want to read more of, where they want to read like their entire back catalogue. And for me, I always find it really hard to say which are my favourite authors, because a lot of the time I will really latch onto one particular work by an author and really love that, but then when I go to their back catalogue or when they bring out a new book, I find myself not being that intrigued by it. And I've realised that the reason I liked the book was not because I liked that particular author's writing style, but because there was an interesting concept that really grabbed me in. As I've said in the past, I'm very much a mood reader, and what really tends to pull me in is that interesting concept, which I think is why I do typically prefer to have a smaller TBR, so that I can cater to my mood, so that when an interesting concept for a book hits me, I can go get it, as opposed to when I have a larger TBR pile and I'm trying to anticipate the kind of book that I'm going to be in the mood for. A bigger TBR for me will often be filled with books that I think I'm going to like because I have liked that author before or I've liked that genre before. But you know, not all historical fiction novels are written the same. Not all memoir is written the same. For me, it's very rarely a particular genre that I latch onto. Going back to Bridget Collins, her first novel, The Binding, was one that, you know, if you kind of read it out to me what the genre was, I'd have been like, nah. Once again, it is a little bit fantastical. It's got a little bit of magical realism in there. There's a little bit of like not quite historical, kind of alternative history element to it, which, you know, like I say, if you read that out as a genre to me, I'd be like, nah, not really. But the concept of the bookbinder was so fascinating to me. And then I ended up picking the book up and really enjoying it. Question number 2 is, what is a convention or a trope that will immediately turn you off your reading experience with a novel or a story? I know I've particularly mentioned that I'm not a massive fan in historical fiction of the witchy wise woman trope. I'm not a big fan of something that a lot of historical fiction authors do, which is they have a woman that they want to show is like not like other girls. She's a little bit different, a little bit difficult. She's different to the other women in her town, and the only way that historical fiction authors seem to know how to do to kind of get that across is to make her somehow magical. And I feel like I see that in so many different things, and sometimes it's done well and other times I'm like, nah. But that's just for historical fiction. Another thing that really turns me off novels is like overly complicated and dense writing style, and I'm also not a big fan, as we know, of stream of consciousness writing style. I know it sounds really bad, but I don't want to have to work super hard to understand the gist of what you're trying to say. There is a reason that I didn't do English literature, and like overly flowery, overly wordy, like too dense language just doesn't do anything for me. It's not that I want my prose to be simplistic or boring, I just want to know what you're on about. I know some people like the challenge, I don't. Question number 3 is, what most appeals to you when reading non-fiction and makes you want to keep reading? I think thinking back on it, I'm very much like a female-focused non-fiction reader, especially when it comes to non-fiction history. I am so fascinated in women's experiences. So if there is a new biography about a historical queen, like, I'm right there. I know that I'm currently doing a video series on the Penguin monarchs, but I am so tempted to also do one on the different historical queens through history. But then I also know that there are other people who have done like such better versions of that series, especially on podcasts. And I feel like, what could I add to that conversation? But yeah, interesting women through history seems to be like my typical thing. Question number 4 is, what is a convention or a trope in non-fiction that will turn you off in your reading experience? I guess I don't really like it when authors in non-fiction tend to take an overly polemic tone. I think maybe because I am a history student, it's been so drilled into me that you have to consider other points of view and other arguments. You can't just be like, this is my opinion and this is the only opinion. I don't like that. I definitely feel like you need to back up your work and show your evidence. And I think maybe that's because that's something that I've had to remind myself often, like when writing essays. essays. I need to show my work. I need to consider other points of view. I need to consider the historical context around whatever it is that I'm saying. I can't just present my arguments and be like, this is all you get. Question number 5 is, would you say that you read more for pleasure and enjoyment or more to learn and exercise your brain? For me, somehow I feel like a lot of my reading is more geared towards the exercising my brain area, even when it's writing that for other people would be more like pleasure and enjoyment reading. Because a lot of the time I'm reading stuff because I kind of want to know what other people are into and I want to like gauge what I think of it. And that feels less like fun little brain candy and more like I am reading to exercise my brain because I want to be in the know of what other people are reading. I want to get my own judgment on it. Or sometimes even if I'm reading something that is in a genre that I typically enjoy, like history or like historical fiction, I'm kind of like reading my way through a genre, which does not always lead to books that I necessarily love, but I feel like I should read it to be able to get a sense of what that genre has to offer, if that makes sense. So in a lot of ways I feel like I don't read purely for pleasure and enjoyment quite as much as I would like to. But that question leads swiftly on to the next one, which is, which type of books are you more likely to rate highly and enjoy more overall? Brain candy, pleasure and enjoyment books, or brain protein, learning and exercise books? And with that in mind, yeah, definitely the brain candy tends to get a higher rating from me more often because of the fact that I'm reading it purely out of pleasure and enjoyment. Because a lot of my rating of a book has to do with how much I personally enjoyed it, but also how much a particular book sets out what it means to do. So for example, 2 books that I gave 5 stars to last year were Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, but also Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light. Are these like an equal 5 stars? Are they 5 stars for exactly the same reasons? No. I both enjoyed both of these books, but I definitely say this goes more on the brain protein side and this is more on the brain candy side. But they're both very important to me. Both of them made it onto my best books of the year, and both of them I would highly recommend that you read, but for different reasons. There are also a lot of books that I've rated like 1 or 2 stars that technically are a lot higher in terms of their quality than other books that I've rated 4 or 5 stars. But for me personally, enjoyment will always go into my rating. And I just hope that, especially in these videos, I can kind of articulate during my wrap-ups and reviews why it is that one got a higher rating than another and that it makes sense to you. Question number 7 is, do you have a sense early on of whether or not the book you're reading will be a 5-star read or a book that you really like? Has a book ever surprised you in this regard? So for me, yes, I definitely feel like I get a good sense early on whether or not a book is going to be 5 stars. I think if I get any sort of surprise, it's kind of like I will start a book and it will feel like a 5-star and I will be thinking to myself, are they going to be able to keep that up all the way through? And then I'll be more surprised if they do. I feel like a lot of the time a book will be absolutely fantastic to start off with and then it'll tail off. So when a book does hit that level and it keeps at that level, I'm like, oh wow, this was great. Maybe that's an insight into my cynical reading mind. I can't think of anything that started out kind of mediocre and then like immediately hit up to a 5 stars at the end. Though I have had quite a few books that greatly improved on a reread for me. Things like Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel and North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell were books that I kind of rated between like 2 and 3 star on the first read, and then on the second read I was like, oh my god, I love this, what was I thinking? And then bumped it up to a 5. But generally I feel like I do get a pretty good sense early on whether or not I'm gonna like a book or not, which is why I think it's kind of ridiculous how much I don't DNF. But then I feel like I have to properly confirm to myself that I don't like a book and why it is exactly that I don't like a book. So then the final question, question number 8. Considering books you've rated 5 stars in the past, or if you don't rate them, then books you've really loved, do you think you would feel the same way about them now? Like I say, I did quite a lot of rereading last year of books that I really loved, and all of them maintained their 5-star status to me. And as I've said, quite a few rereads jumped up from like 2 or 3 stars to 5-star reads. For me, books generally do tend to maintain or even improve on a reread for me. Though there are definitely books that I've looked at my Goodreads 5-star list and I've thought, I wonder if that would get the same rating now. If I read it for the first time, would that get 5 stars? Maybe not. And I think a lot of that is to do with like the age I was when I read it. There are a lot of YA books that I probably wouldn't pick up now because I just don't read that genre very much. I've read other things that maybe explore a genre better than that initial read, but I have no urge to kind of rate them down because that was the true rating that I had in my brain at that particular time. And I have no urge to reread them to check that my rating is still the same. But also I feel like because I don't give 5 stars very, very freely, the books that I tend to rate 5 stars tend to maintain a lot more. The books that do end up getting them on a reread generally will end up maintaining that status. That coveted 5-star status. For me, they are just that good. And also because my 5-star rating is often very, very personal, it's something that really personally spoke to me rather than being an indicator of its quality or how different or unique it is. That will also be a big reason in why that 5-star has stayed the same and why those particular books will tend to stand the test of time. And I generally would always rather have happy memories of a book than try to go back to prove myself wrong. You know, there are enough books that I have meh feelings about I don't need to feel meh about the books that I think I love. And then the final question is to tag people. I'm not quite sure who's already done this tag. I think it's quite a new one, so hopefully not too many people. I would like to tag Grace over at GK Reads. I would like to tag Leanne Rose and also Rasheen from Sick of Reading. I'd love to hear some of your answers to this tag. And you know, any of you who are interested in this tag, or even in the comment section if you've got any differing answers to this, any thoughts you have about this tag and its questions, I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.